Hi, this is TechHat Todd, and we're going to see how we can use our DevOps tool subscription with TechHat Solutions to deploy a simple .NET app. And from this, then you could deploy any kind of .NET app or work on a web space that you have pretty much full control over the website. Pretty much takes a TechHat tool subscription to do this. Maybe there's some things in here on your own you could glean, but this is really oriented toward you having that. You should know how to remote into your subscription on the on the remote VM. And so I'm in as T. Schultz here. It's kind of a prerequisite, and I'm going to get rid of that window for the moment. Let's see, a little bit of familiarity with sort of how web pages work in C# and Visual Studio and the file system. It doesn't have to be deep, and you can probably just follow along on this thing, but that's something you need to get used to. And great. And so you will have access to a site, and it'll be covered with an SSL certificate if you need that. That means stuff is encrypted. A couple of things you need to, there's some naming conventions going on. Some of them are required, some of it's just the way things are set up. So, put in your login ID, and without the braces, wherever you see brace login ID. I'll be using T. Schultz. Put in the name of the computer that you're remoting into with the TechHat Solutions, wherever you see brace computer. For us, it's VM1. You can always find this out. I'm up here in the VM, and you can open up a PowerShell or a command window. And as for host name, a number of other ways to do this, but it's VM1 here, and you might be on a different VM. Find a computer name, and some of these standards aren't absolutely required. It's just the way we've configured this, and we're not diving deep into how this works and how does the SSL certificate get applied and how does it know to the TechHat Solutions domain gets there. All interesting stuff. That's for another demonstration. This is really just, okay, I've got this resource, how can I publish some things out there? So let's get started. First thing, you might just from a browser, notice I'm off the VM. This is up in the cloud. I'm just on a plain old computer, and there is, if I go to T. Schultz, your login the computer name .TechHat Solutions will get you a this is your web space, and there's a default web page put out there. This is covered by HTTPS too, so now that was a secure ping to it. You got this lock, so you do have a secure in the sense of being encrypted, and that somebody looked at TechHat Solutions enough and found that somebody's home. We use SSL certificates to encrypt the traffic between the consumer and the server, and a little bit to authenticate perhaps who this is. I wouldn't depend too much. It's not hard to get a HTTPS certificate. Doesn't mean they're not trying out to fraud you or anything like that. But just to kind of prove that all this works out, I'm going up into the remote VM now, and I'm opening up. I'm doing it through the file folders. You can a lot of ways to do this, but on the C drive, there's a folder called DevWebs, and in DevWebs is a folder for everybody who's got the DevTools subscription on that particular VM. So you'll find one for yourself, and I've dived into there, and in there you'll find a default HTML. And if you already know how this goes, I'm going to open with, and I'm going to use Notepad. This is what gets served as the way this is set up when somebody visits that particular web page. So this is a little bit of HTML. Just to kind of prove it to you, I am putting the Arthur here in my name, saving it up here on the server. Nothing changed there, but if I refresh, I got something new. So the idea is that this URL, in web space from anywhere on the planet gets mapped through the pretty interesting set of string and bubblegum and conventions, and setting up a domain and setting up with an SSL and setting up the server, gets kind of mapped to here. So when somebody on the planet looks for this, they're getting referred to here, and the fact that default HTML comes up is because default HTML is one of the default files, and we'll look at how you can set up your site and have different default files to set up for that. Okay, so that's just a little bit. And if all you needed was a site that would serve what I call static content, HTML with JavaScript, then that's all we need. Whatever files we put into that folder up here would be available and accessible to the web, and you could build a standard website from that. Well, we're going to do something a little bit more in depth. Let me get back into my guide a little bit. We want to be able to publish, this happens to be .NET applications, things that do a little bit something from the server and serve up pages and have some server-side code. Okay, so this thing walks you through it. While I'm in here, I'm just going to grab this little bit of code so I don't have to come back and forth. But it's in there in that guide for you, so I'm going to go up here. And we're going to build that with Visual Studio. So I'm now going to build a real simple web application. It's going to be what's called an HTTP handler, a generic HTTP handler that really just provides a response from a web request. But I'm just going to do File, New, Project, and I'm going to call it Demo Web. Notice, and kind of if you've never done this much, it's going to go in now source repos under my login ID. It's going to create a solution and a project with the same name, and sometimes if you just have a one project solution, it's okay. Solutions can hold multiple projects when you're doing something big. This one we are targeting the .NET framework. This is not core. We'll look at that in another. This is a little heavier weight on the server side. The consumer, all they need is a browser, but we need the .NET framework installed, and it is up here. And so I've called it Demo Web. So basically I just started a new project. We're going to create an empty project, trying to make this as simple. None of the support things do we need. We really can't change the authentication, so empty, nothing checked, and OK. And what this does is then build the infrastructure for a basic .NET framework. ASP.NET it's called. ASP was for active server pages. That's their server-side code, and .NET came in at around 2000, 2001 as a way to do it. And you get some files and folders in here, and I could look into what those do sometime, but this isn't the time. We just want to make a quick start. Well, this doesn't have any content, so I'm going to right-click, and make sure you right-click on the project, not the solution, and I want to add to that a new item. And the item I want to add under web, you can maybe look under general. We are going to get a generic HTTP handler, and it's got an ASHX extensions. That's just kind of the convention that Microsoft has for something that's it's a web handler, provides a response to a request. Okay, what the heck does that mean? Just in general, in a sense, when we requested this, the server had a response of this. Okay, and just sent that down the wire. I'm closing it off because I don't need it. And so I think I was working on something. So the idea of what a web server does is it gets a request and provides a response. If the response is static HTML, then the server can just say, okay, I will respond with that file. Here, it's going to produce a response that we code in. And when we look at this code, there's this method, process request, that takes a context that it's provided, meaning something from the thing. I'm just now pasting in the code that I got from the web page. The guide, I guess it's got extra line feeds in there, so let's just get rid of some of those because I think they Well, they don't clutter up the reading, but they spread it out so much that it's harder to read. Okay, and so you can think of that anything goes, the context response. This is stuff that's pushed back then to whoever's consuming it. And if you've seen all this before, then just bear with. So it's kind of saying, oh, in my header, I'm returning HTML, and if you look at what I'm writing here, I'm writing literally some HTML with some tags. This says hello from Todd. You might, if you're trying to follow this, then that's good. That's up in the title, in the header. Then we have a body tag, and then in the body tag I have a paragraph that says hello world from Todd. And what this response is going to do is write, here's the parameters I got. You might realize that when somebody makes a request, okay, so I can look in the request I got, there are a lot of parameters. Maybe they're query key parameters, and there's a bunch of parameters that HTTP does that, and we'll see what they are shortly. You don't need to worry too much about this code, but it's saying, well, let me look in every parameter I got. This one says for every key, parameter key in the keys that I got, let me write out a string where I say what the key is and what the parameter is. And then it's going to put in a paragraph. That's all, folks. And all this, and then say the response ends. So basically this is like a genie that's going to type all this real quick, put it in an HTML. It's going to be HTML because I wrote it that way, push it down the wire, and then the browser will look at it. So basically you'll just paste all that in. I'm going to press F5. You probably know that F5 will start and test a bit of code. It starts out in a local host. Local host is on the server. Nobody in the world can look at this. Oh, it goofed up. It says forbidden. Well, it says forbidden because the web server is not configured to list contents of the directory. When I pressed F5, it went and just said, well, I'm going to run the folder. There was no startup file to speak of. Well, what I'm going to do is a SHX is put in literally the name of this thing within the folder, and now it gets. And so we can see what we got. And if you've seen this before, there are a bunch of parameters that get thrown down the line when a request is made. And so what we have is now a server-side application that will just tell whoever requested it the parameters that it got. This is actually useful. I keep this. Sometimes when I'm testing query strings or posting things, it's just nice to see, well, what stuff got there. But notice that the header came out and everything like that. So I'm going to exit this. If that debugging doesn't stop, then just make sure you do debug, and there'll be stop debugger. And well, great. So now we have an application that tests out just fine, but it needs to. It isn't out there where anybody in the World Wide Web can see it. And so the next step is, once we get this accomplished, is we need to publish it. So that's really kind of the focus of this whole exercise. We have an application. We know where our web space is. Remember, it's web devs in our login. So the way we publish this is we're going to build, but we're going to publish this demo web. And since we're up on the server, the easiest way to publish is to publish into a folder. That is, we're going to say, let's make a application. Well, we have an application, and we're going to put it in a folder, and where we should put that folder is not this bin release publish. Browse for it. Go up on the C drive, look in dev webs, find your folder, and with that highlighted, notice we don't have any subfolders in there. We want to add a folder. I would put each application in a folder. It really gets confusing if you try to put two applications in a folder, two projects, say. So while I'm here, there's this little add folder thing here, and I'm just going to call it demo web. Right? It doesn't have to be the same name as my project, but it helps me, and this is going to be the name of the that. Maybe press enter just to be sure that that's what comes in down here. If you don't press enter, I don't know what happens, but we want it to be demo web. So open, and this is really saying, okay, I'm going to publish this application. exactly what happens with the, it compiles it, it sets up the thing so the IIS server can process it. Again, we're not in the deep thing, well, what happens with that. We're in the mechanics of how do I get mine published, and really that's all we have to do. Everything else defaults. If I do publish here, it's kind of done it. Notice I got a build, a compile, and a publish succeeded. Okay, now if somebody worked, so let me kind of go out, and if I look out in my folder in DevWebs, where I was, remember I had this default HTML, and I have this demo web folder here. And in demo web, there's this, some stuff. There's the show parms, the basic structure. The web config, if you know about ASP.NET, lets me configure my web apps and binaries that have to do with, the code that I developed. Great. If somebody off the, the World Wide Web, I'm going to see what happens. We could say, well, what happens if I try to go to demo web here? We're getting that access denied because, not too surprised about that. And was it show parms.asa? This isn't going to work either. I just want to make sure I got, so in demo web we have show parms ASHX, but this isn't going to work here. Okay, can't, because this up here is not an application yet. We publish things into the folder, but IIS doesn't yet know it's an application. So what we need to do is when we first publish it is use IIS to make it an application. So to do that, I'm up here on the server. I'm going to write INETNGR, or enough of that to where I get information services coming in, and you have authority over the site. You really are going to look like a remote deployment. So the first thing that you're going to do is you want to be sure you choose connect to a site, not just to a server or down to an application. You have access, you have authority over a site. So connect to a site. The server name is going to be the name of the computer that you're on. Okay. And the site name is going to be the your login ID .computer name, kind of the thing that comes in before .techhats.solutions out there on the World Wide Web. So what we're doing here is using Internet Information Services to, and I'm going to click Next, to connect to the site. The name is going to be computer name / your login, and you do need this even though you're on that server. This is for remote development too, or remote delegation, and so we need that. And you'll put in here whatever login you use on the server. So it's really just doing that. It's going to want a name for the connection, and so what it'll do is it'll remember all the parameters except your password. You can change it to something else. This is a good name. It reminds me of what I'm connecting to. So I click Finish, and now what I see is, I have this connection, and the way that, and don't worry if you don't have these two, okay? I'm doing those with a class, and if you're in the class you'll do them soon enough. We're looking at this demo web version. So the way that I configured the server, or TechHats configured the server, is whatever you put in that folder, the DevWebs folder with your login, shows up as a web, it shows up here as either a folder or an application. Notice that this, the demo web just has a folder icon where this has like a little world with documents in front. Well, what we need to do is turn this into an application. So I've right-clicked and on Deploy, Convert to Application, and now IIS understands, I get it. This is an application. I don't serve up these pages directly. What I do when somebody requests them, show parms. Okay. What I do when somebody requests them is, and it wouldn't have worked even before I did that. I had to turn it into an application. Now anybody on the planet can go to this URL and see what the parms are. Notice that I came in with HTTPS, and I got a few extra parms here. You'll see that SSL.com is the issuer of the certificate, and it is. That's who I I purchased that, and helps me maintain the name of the certificate. The common name of it is star.vm1. So that is, I said, anything that it begins, is your login ID. But basically, I said I want to cover anything .vm1.TechHatSolutions, and there's some other things. It shows me actually this path. So, that you don't have to show that back to your user. This is giving some information. If you open this up to just a generic anonymous user, gives them some information about where that thing exists. Remember, we were using the application to tell something back about itself. You don't have to do that, but it does show a little bit about what's going on. So I've got an application that goes out to the world. One thing I want to do is make it a little bit easier. Okay. If somebody just tries to go to Demo Web, they get this thing to come up. So back into the server, I can, while I'm on this application, make sure you're on the application when you do this. If you do it on the site, I'm looking at default document, then it will set a default document for the site. But we want to set a default document for the application. And if I double click on that and add, and put showparms.ashx, the thing that I know, it put that up at the top of the list. At the site level, I go to the site level and look at default document. The reason default HTML came up when they didn't even ask for a file was because that was a site default. Now if I look at Demo Web and its default document, I put showparms.ashx on the top. And what that says is something like, it says exactly, look in the list. If you see showparms.ashx, then put it up automatically. If you don't see that, go to the next one, go to the next one. If you don't see any of these, then just say, I can't see anything. So now if I go off the site, and remember, this is, I didn't ask for a particular file to get served, or processed and then served, but because I set a default document, I got it. And so there are a number of things that you have control of for your site and for each application in your site. Authentication levels, when somebody gets a page not found error, do you want to do something different? And so that's how you can deploy an application. If you decide, oops, I need to delete. Well, let me even before we get to that, let me go. If you change your application, right? So get back here. If we change the application, hello world from Todd, and I'm adding Schultz, right? I'm going to have to publish this application again to get that out there. Notice when I went to publish this time, it's just waiting me for it to publish. It's remembered all the other the bits that are out there. So when I say publish and one succeeded, blah, blah, blah. If I republish, hello from Todd Schultz. So that's how I make a change that can be seen then out on the World Wide Web. I publish it, and when they refresh, they get it. They maybe have to delete their some of their web history depending on how their browser remembers the stuff that it's had before. If for some reason I would need to get rid of this application, and I don't need to, make sure you're on. If I choose deploy and delete application and content, I'm going to try it here. It's going to delete, the fact that I have an application in IIS, and it's going to delete the content out there. Okay, and so that folder's now gone away in T. Schultz. Okay, so it deleted the application, but that's okay. I can, if I need it back, then I can always build and publish. Now what I'm going to, and I don't know, the fact that I got rid of this folder, I don't know if I just publish right away, is it going to say I don't find that, or is it going to do it for me? But what I'd rather do is, I just realized I'm going to have to do a, I'm calling it Demo Web. Just plain and safe. You could play with, okay, what's going to happen, but that way the folder's out there for sure. And save, and now publish, and okay, that put the application back out there. But since it's been deleted, and remember, if I did something there, I did a refresh here that I need to deploy and convert that back to an application. So if I've deleted it and put it back, then I need to convert it back to an application. If all I do is republish it, it's an application, so we don't end up in here too much. If you ever have a problem deleting it, sometimes it sometimes keeps things in memory, especially of forms. You can use under deploy recycle, and if you recycle the application pool, then that will get the web server to let go of your application. It'll also it'll restart your it'll restart your whole site, is what I'm saying. So if you have some other application in your site that's kind of on, it's going to have a little bit of a blurb. And I hope it goes. Yeah, there it goes. And that just is a way to restart your site if you ever need that. And that's pretty much then it. I want to get out and see, did I leave anything out that I kind of wanted to demo? So this walkthrough kind of gives you the look and feel of how it all goes. But now you know how to deploy an application, and it's one of the features of the subscription. Kind of happy with it. Takes a little bit of work to kind of get it set up, but it gets you a way to publish applications as you need to. All right, so till next time, Tech Cat Todd signing off. Bye-bye.